Welcome into OutKick the show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I appreciate all of you hanging out with us. We are rolling through the Monday edition of the program. Met a lot of you down in Miami. Had a great time there. I am back this week in the great place and state of Tennessee, Nashville here. Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. With Prize Picks, you against the number. All you do is pick more or less 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks. As little as 4 correct picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000. Download the app today. Use code OutKick. You can turn $5 into $50 when you place your first pick in the app. And you will be able to play whether you're in California, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, where I am, Florida, where I just was. Prize Picks, third biggest out there, 13 million downloads, 40 states. Make sure that you don't miss out. $50 when you play $5. Use code OutKick, prizepicks.com. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, let's dive into a bunch of stories we got out there that are percolating on the OutKick universe. I want to start with this. Over the weekend, I saw a story that you guys probably saw as well that went mega viral, and the suggestion was that the Philadelphia Eagles had rejected a Trump White House invite to come and celebrate their Super Bowl championship. Seemed unlikely to me, but it continued to get more and more viral traction online. Over the weekend, I did my own deep dive. I jumped in and I said, okay, where does this story come from? Comes from basically a British tabloid, and it's a story that they wrote citing an anonymous source saying if the Eagles won, they wouldn't go. That was published before the Super Bowl was even played. Several weeks later, somebody grabs it, decides they're going to aggregate it, doesn't attribute it to the anonymous source, barely attributes it to the organization that published it in the first place, takes on a life of its own. Everybody's reacting to it. So Monday morning, I reached out to the Trump White House. As you can well imagine, we have lots of friends, as you well know, in the Trump White House. And I said, hey, what's the story here? Is there actually any truth to this at all? I put up the tweet on it early this morning. And what I was told is this is fake news. The White House has not extended an offer to the Philadelphia Eagles yet. It is still very soon after the championship was garnered. And usually those championship visits don't happen until the summer. And the Eagles have given no indication at all, as they have not received an invite about whether they will be coming or not. Other people out there have reported, and we'll have questions for the Eagles given the fact that the NFL Combine is underway. Maybe we'll have a clearer answer as to whether or not the Eagles will accept this invite one day coming forward. But the point for all of you to know is this is not a real story. It is an aggregated story that took on a life of its own on social media. And I would just encourage all of you, I do this myself, follow the thread and find out where a story comes from. There are lots of accounts that will aggregate a quote and they don't link to the quote. And you need to go back, like pull the thread and find out, hey, what is the backstory for this? Where did it come from? To see whether or not you want to treat it as factual or not. Here, the entire sum of this story was an alleged anonymous source associated with the Eagles who gave a quote before the Super Bowl. So I think the Eagles, if I were predicting, will visit the White House this year. If I were predicting. And I think partly that's going to be because Trump won the state of Pennsylvania, because you saw the Super Bowl crowd overwhelmingly cheered for Trump, and because Trump's just not that controversial anymore. I saw a stat this morning from the Harvard-Harris poll, and Adam, you can correct me if I'm wrong in terms of the data on this, but Trump had a 52 or 51 to 42 positivity rating. It was a +9. Trump was positive for white, Hispanic, and Asians. He was positive for every age group but 18 to 24-year-olds. And Trump had a +17 among men. This is similar to the +20 60-40 positivity rating that CBS came out and said Trump had on Super Bowl Sunday when they released that poll. Huge majorities of men are supporting what Trump has done. And the NFL, by and large, is a male fan base. I know there's lots of women who are NFL fans, but the overwhelming majority of football fans are men, and the overwhelming majority of men support Trump. So I think they will end up going. OutKick has got a story up about this, about how the story came to be. And I would just say, be careful on all facets in social media about where those stories are coming from in general. Okay, a couple of other things that are out there. Well, let me first focus a little bit more on sports. Major League Baseball. This is a big deal. Came down, I believe it was on Friday, that ESPN was canceling their relationship with Major League Baseball. And in fact, ESPN was paying $550 million a year. This will be the last year that ESPN will have Major League Baseball. They have had Major League Baseball every year going all the way back to 1990. So what is that, 35 years that Major League Baseball has been on ESPN? It now will come to a close next year as ESPN declined to exercise the option for the next 3 years. Here is what I think is super important about this. ESPN's in trouble. ESPN paid $2.6 billion. That is $2.6 billion for 1/3 of the NBA. I believe NBC and Amazon each got 1/3 roughly. So in the future, NBA, 1/3 ESPN, 1/3 Amazon, 1/3 is going to be on NBC, Comcast, NBC Universal. Okay. I think this is full-on panic. I think that ESPN's overall business is collapsing. There is, I believe, a panic setting in over what the NBA was paid. NBA ratings have collapsed, including the second lowest All-Star game rating on record. Overall viewership has plummeted since 2020 when the NBA embraced BLM and put political slogans on the back of the jerseys. No one is watching these games. The actual league itself is in trouble as LeBron and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry, 3 historic superstars, are preparing to leave the stage sooner rather than later. The next generation of stars has not picked up the same level of support. And so I believe where we are headed is a full-fledged panic, especially by the ESPNs of the world. As I have told you, and I should probably write on this long form, there may be a way to make more money for the streamers, for the Amazons and the Netflixes of the world when it comes to sports rights, because they can target ads better, probably charge more, and deliver a higher level of efficiency in terms of the broadcast. In other words, instead of everybody seeing the same ad on television, on streaming services, Amazon, for instance, knows if you just had a baby. Amazon knows if you just bought a new house, probably. Amazon knows what books you like to read, what movies you like to watch. They can advertise more efficiently to you because they know basically everything about you. As long as you have an Amazon account, you probably are like me and you have Amazon packages arriving almost daily. And if that's true, Amazon, I guarantee you, on the Clay Travis profile could say, oh, Clay Travis likely has kids, likely a dad, married, high income, based on my zip code, based on what we spend, can tell you what we watch on Amazon Prime, all of those things. And as a result, they could target me better. So I can understand why streaming services are paying more than television networks. What I can't understand is the logic here. If ESPN, which is their stated goal, is trying to create an app that will be all things for all sports fans, that's what they're saying right now. In the fall, they are launching a new app which will be all things to all sports fans. How can they get all sports fans without having Major League Baseball on the app? And how can you tell a Major League Baseball fan, hey, sorry, we think 1/3 of the NBA is more valuable basically than half of Major League Baseball by a function of 5x? In other words, how can you not spend 1/5 of the dollars for Major League Baseball that you're spending on the NBA? And how can you claim to be all things for all sports fans if you don't have any Major League Baseball at all? That's a tough putt to sink for me. And I think it throws into complete question the logic behind ESPN's app offering that will be out there that they claim is going to be a must-have for all sports fans. We're certainly not for Major League Baseball fans, because ESPN, for the first time since 1990, next year is going to have 0 Major League Baseball games. Every Major League Baseball fan, and I'm one of them, is going to have to go elsewhere. Now, I've had my issues with Major League Baseball in the past, and I think sometimes it's way too hard to find the games. I've complained about this publicly because my family are all big Atlanta Braves fans. But I got to tell you, this is a big strikeout for ESPN. They blew it here. And you can argue, oh, they're paying too much. Yeah, no, go figure. They've paid too much for every sporting event that they've signed up for the last dozen years. Ever since cord cutting started, ESPN's overall expenditures are crazy. I asked this question. Why is ESPN paying I think it's $1.3 billion for the college football playoff? People I talked to say there was no second bidder. In other words, ESPN is paying orders of magnitude more for the college football playoff than anybody else was remotely willing to pay. And then they pay $2.6 billion for the NBA, $2.7 billion, I think it is, for one Monday Night Football game, and they can't figure out a way to make the math work for Major League Baseball. I'm sorry, I don't blame Rob Manfred here. I've ripped Major League Baseball. I ripped Rob Manfred for the decision to pull the All-Star game out of Atlanta. Some of you will remember that. I tried it, no pun intended, call balls and strikes here. I think this is an indefensibly awful decision by Major League Baseball. That happened on Friday. And again, I think it calls into question ESPN's ability to claim that they're going to create a sports app for all sports fans. I think ESPN's business is collapsing. I think they have overpaid for rights, whether it's college football, whether it's the NBA, whether it's the NFL. And I think they're trying to cut costs. This would not make me optimistic if I'm a UFC fan that ESPN's going to have the money to re-up with the UFC. I just think that this is a big, huge swing and a miss, and I think that ESPN has blown it. Okay, that story is out there. Positive. There's something going on that is out there where there is a desperate demand for communal experiences. And some of you are going to say, what do you mean, Clay? The U.S.-Canada hockey game had over 9 million viewers on Thursday night. I watched it. I bet a lot of you did. Canada won 3-2 in overtime. Over 9 million people watched. That is more than have watched any hockey game outside of the Olympics in the history of hockey. In other words, if you classify this as an NHL game, never has an NHL game been more watched in the United States of America than Thursday night. Partly, that's the U.S.-Canada drama. It is that you had the United States going up against Canada. Totally makes some sense to me why that was so popular. But also in conjunction with the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight, which had something like 35 million people supposedly watching it on Netflix. And with the all-time record being set for viewership for the Super Bowl in the Eagles-Chiefs game, even though the game wasn't very good. What's going on? What is driving all of this interest? I think it's a desperate desire to celebrate events together, live events. Because streaming is great. Last, 2 nights ago, Saturday night, I got home from Miami, and I watched the new Beverly Hills Cop movie, Axel F., There probably weren't that many of you watching that, but I bet a lot of you over the weekend were watching your own favorite streaming show. And that's great. I watched Cobra Kai on Netflix, as I told all of you, on, February 13th, the day that it came out, with all my boys. There is something cool about watching whatever you want whenever you want to watch it. That is the Netflixization of American media experiences. The challenge with that, though, is everybody watches on their own timeline. And what it means is there's still a desperate craving for humans to come together and all watch something together. And I think sports has an incredible opportunity to fill that void. Even sports like Tyson, Paul, and USA Canada, which nobody would have predicted a few months ago would be huge draws. Why is that? Because sports has its own built-in conflict. And this is why I think ESPN's brand has collapsed. ESPN decided that we needed double conflict, right? Instead of just sitting around and saying, boy, I want the Cowboys to win, or I want the Eagles to win in a rivalry in the NFC East, or I want this quarterback to do well and the other quarterback to do poorly, right? This is the gambling mindset of America. You pick a side. They decided that we needed to have multiple sides inside of a game. They sliced and diced us identity-wise into multiple identity politics demographics. So think about this for a minute. Sports already has conflict. USA versus Canada is the conflict. We don't need another conflict. Chiefs, Eagles, Super Bowl, conflict. We don't need a black quarterback versus white quarterback conflict on top of that. We don't need a Democrat versus Republican or independent versus either conflict embedded there. Sports is the perfect story. It's protagonist, it's antagonist. You can decide which is which. They come together, they combat each other, and at the end, one side wins, the other side loses. That is the essence of story, right? Story without conflict, nobody watches. It's happily ever after. You get to happily ever after by having a protagonist and an antagonist situation. That's why sports, in many ways, are soap operas for men. Women in general watch soap operas because of the conflict inherent in the drama of the day-to-day existence of the show. Men watch sports because there is an inherent conflict. Who is the bigger, stronger, faster fighter? Who is the better team? All of us sit around and argue, boom, they come together, and we all leave, and we argue something new. What ESPN did was it took identity politics and it layered an additional conflict into sports, which was unnecessary. White, black, Asian, Hispanic, male, female, gay, straight, whatever your background, in a stadium by and large, or an arena, you don't think about what divides you. You think about whether you're wearing the same colors. I have never in my life been in a crowded arena or football stadium, had my team winning, and wanted to give high fives to everybody around and thought, I wonder how these people voted. I wonder what these people think about abortion. I wonder what these people think about border or violent crime or the death penalty or any other of the dozens of political issues that could divide us. All I care about is, boom, they're on my team, high five. I would encourage, and in fact, if I were the president of ESPN, I would sit down everybody on my team and I would say, enough with the identity politics BS. We are a sports network. Our ratings have been collapsing. The NBA itself has destroyed itself by going all in on woke identity politics. All we want to do is let the conflict of the sport govern. If you want to argue that Anthony Davis for Luka is a great trade, congratulations. If you want to argue vice versa, great. If you want to argue Josh Allen should be MVP or Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, that's fine. Leave all the identity politics BS on the curb. The sport itself creates the conflict. When you create an additional conflict, when you divide further, all you do is destroy the value of the sport itself. And I think that's what the American public is telling us. Whatever you thought, Mike Tyson, Jake Paul, I didn't see a single person do a racial take on it. You could have been like, oh, Mike Tyson's 60. There's no way he should be fighting, or 58 or whatever he was. You could say Jake Paul is a clown showman. You could call the whole Netflix show a joke. What you couldn't do was deny that a lot of people cared and everybody picked sides. I wanted Mike Tyson to knock out Jake Paul. Some of you may have felt differently. U.S. Canada. You couldn't have convinced me. If you had told me 5 months ago, hey, Clay, you know what you're going to be doing on a random Thursday in Miami? You're going to get back to your hotel room and you're going to be upset because there's too much traffic when you're headed back to your hotel room because you don't want to miss a minute of the USA-Canada hockey game. I don't remember the last, well, I do. It was probably when the Nashville Predators were in the Stanley Cup Finals that I watched the last full playoff game in hockey, watched the last NHL game on television. It's been years. Yet here we are. Everybody was watching USA-Canada. Why? Desperate desire to share something together, to come across ideological differences, political differences. There is a great upswell. I'm telling you, I can feel it, of people who just want to say, America's awesome. I want to experience this all with you together. And my pitch, if I were running a sports league or if I was running a sports network, is sports are good. Conflict is natural, but make the conflict a discussion about who's going to win. Leave all that identity politics BS by the wayside. People are over it. The woke era has collapsed. Speaking of, Joy Reid's been fired. MSNBC employs, I think, a lot of dumb left-wing propagandists. Joy Reid was the dumbest and the most consistently outrageous and moronic of all of their employees. And this feels inevitable, but it also is about something much bigger than Joy Reid. And let me explain. In 2017, when Donald Trump was elected, it was actually great business if you were the New York Times, if you were the Washington Post, if you were CNN, if you were MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, Politico, all of these different companies. It was tremendous business to go all in on Trump is a Manchurian candidate. The only reason Trump won was Russia. Trump is evil. Democracy dies in darkness was a business imperative that made sense. Here's the problem. It's not working in 2025. The legacy media trust has collapsed. People trust Trump way more than they trust the legacy media. And so why did Joy Reid get fired? It's not because Comcast suddenly decided she was an embarrassment to MSNBC. It's because people aren't watching. And Elon Musk buying X and Jeff Bezos deciding he's not going to allow endorsements at the Washington Post, all of these things that are happening, to me, are emblematic of the collapsing business model. The anti-Trump business model doesn't exist anymore. Trump has destroyed the businesses that tried to attack him. He is the rock upon which they dashed themselves out from a business perspective. Washington Post subscriptions collapsing. New York Times not growing very fast. CNN, MSNBC, the numbers are a shell of what they were in 2017. Meanwhile, Fox News, 70% audience share. Why is all of this happening? I think it's because the business has collapsed, and Joy Reid is a casualty of that business collapsing. Secondary big picture analysis with Joy Reid. She has no fan base. I don't remember anyone getting fired and seeing universal joy like this and almost no disappointment. You might not like Bill O'Reilly. You might not like Tucker. But when they left Fox News, there were a lot of people who were big fans of both those guys. Joy Reid has been able to talk to you on a television network, millions of you, for years, and no one cares that she was fired. She has no fan base. There are a lot of people out there that have made a lot of money, Don Lemon, Jim Acosta, that as soon as they aren't on their network television shows anymore, they vanish because they have no actual fan base. And what I would say to you is, if you're running a network and somebody is leaving and they are going to make a tenth of what you were paying them, if they're lucky, why were you paying them? There are talents who have left television and done really well. I'll give you three. Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, Piers Morgan. They have the ability to compete in the larger internet space. They work hard. They're smart. They're interesting. Most people on television don't do those three things. They don't work that hard. They're not particularly smart. They're not that interesting. They basically vanish as soon as they leave television. This is why they fight so hard to try to keep those jobs. The internet is intensely competitive. Podcasting is intensely competitive. Television isn't. It's competitive to get the job, but you're only competing with a handful of people on television. And so I think the lesson here is, if Joy Reid goes out on her own, let's say she makes $3 million a year. I think she's going to struggle to make $300,000 on the internet because she's not that interesting, and she's not that smart, and she's not that hardworking. And what you're seeing is, as television and the internet come together, whether it's through YouTube, whether it's through a digital video like this, everybody is having to compete everywhere. This has happened in audio, right? My Clay and Buck radio show competes with everybody out there in the podcast space. And what you're seeing is, in this larger ecosystem, the winners can be huge, but also a lot of people who won in television don't win anymore once they leave television. And so I think Joy Reid's career's over. I think she's like Don Lemon. She's not going to have any fan base that follows her. She has built nothing that is connected to her. She was just on the platform. And I was texting with a buddy recently, and I was talking about the future of media. I think there's going to be a lot of superstars who make a lot of money. I think there's going to be a huge hollowed out middle. All those people are going to lose their jobs, the Joy Reids of the world. And then there's going to be a lot of young people who make starting salaries and are trying to build into superstars. I think you're going to see a great hollowing as cable continues to collapse. A lot of people aren't going to have the same jobs. A lot of people are going to have to take huge pay cuts because the money is not there. Ultimately, that is the story. The money has to justify your paycheck. People have to make money. Your boss has to make money eventually. Friday, credit to Donald Trump calling out Governor Janet Mills. I talked about this right after it happened with Martha McCollum, but I cannot believe that Democrats have allowed their entire political party to be defined by men should be able to compete in women's sports. I shared these numbers because they came from the New York Times last month. 79% of people believe men should not be able to play women's sports, including 94% of Republicans, but 67% of Democrats. 2 out of every 3 Democrats watching me right now are many of them, I bet, who think it's crazy for men to be able to compete in women's sports. How has the Democrat Party allowed itself to be defined by so many 20% support issues? Hey, we want less examination of waste and fraud in government. Hey, we want more men in women's sports. Hey, we want a wide open southern border. Hey, we want criminals to spend less time behind bars. Most of what Trump is executing right now is just basic common sense that even Democrats publicly agreed with just a few years ago. Keep that in mind. Lastly, congratulations to Dan Bongino, who is going to become the deputy director, I believe is the official title of the FBI under Kash Patel. Dan has a really successful podcast, successful radio show, owns part of Rumble. He is walking away from a lot of money to take a government job. Congratulations to him. I think this is what government should be made up of. People who have had success in other parts of life and are willing to give back to serve their country, even if it means they end up making less money, sometimes far less money. That may be a choice that I am faced with one day, and that is why I am banking as much money right now as I can, because I don't want to have to worry about money if opportunities to serve the nation come maybe in the years ahead. So I give credit to Dan Bongino for stepping in, and I think the FBI is going to be in great hands with Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. Last comment, if you want a movie review, controversial, you may have heard me just talking about it on Clay and Buck. I watched Axel F, which is the Beverly Hills Cop new extension, I guess the fourth Beverly Hills Cop movie in the franchise. I thought it was really well done. It was a 1980s buddies comedy. It was not trying to cop buddies movie. It was not trying to be anything else. And so if you liked those movies, the Lethal Weapons, the Police Academies, the Beverly Hills Cops, when you were growing up, I think that you will like this movie as well. It's up on Netflix. I'm not claiming it's Citizen Kane. I'm not claiming that it's going to revolutionize your life experience, but it was a nostalgic, enjoyable show, not unlike what they did with Cobra Kai. So I enjoyed it, and I would encourage you guys to check it out. I'm getting lit up by Buck on the radio, but actually a lot of you have reacted in a positive way to it on social media. All right. I love all of you. I'll be here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week for OutKick the show. I'll be in Nashville all week. Excited to be back home for a little while until I head back out. This, like I said, has been OutKick the show. DBAP unless you need to SBAP. Thank you guys for hanging out. I will see you tomorrow.